I think this is extremely serious. As you say, this is a terror suspect who has managed to escape before facing trial, national security offences as well. And obviously the most immediate issue is for everyone to support the police in their urgent pursuit and investigation to apprehend this man so that he can stand trial. However, there are some really grave questions about how on earth this could happen, including about why he was in that level of security, why he wasn't in the higher security prison that he had previously been in, and also staffing levels, security checks, all of those sorts of things. We really need some urgent answers on this.
Yeah, but the governor's not without blame.
Well, we need to know the answers, don't we? And we need the full investigation into what has happened. There have been concerns about staffing levels at Wandsworth for some time. The reports, I think you've heard from the local MP about some reports of just 70% of shifts being staffed on one day. There are other reports about there being 30% of staff being absent or on sickness. There's also some reports about some security upgrades, technology upgrades, including CCTV, being delayed by the Ministry of Justice. So we need to know answers on all of those things. And then going back particularly to this question about why he was transferred out of Belmarsh, which is the much higher security prison, which you would expect to be used in a case like this.
What's your understanding as to reasons why prisoners are moved around from category A to B?
Well, we know that there are issues around sometimes overcrowding. And we know, for example, at the moment, the number of people in prison has been going up, particularly because we've seen this huge increase in remand prisoners. And those are people who are waiting for trial or sentencing, like this individual was. Exactly. That is now at about a 50-year record high. And that's because of huge long court delays. So we've got to tackle those court delays because that is putting the additional pressure on the prison system that then means there's a risk that prisoners are being moved around. And in this case, clearly in lack of security in place, that he was able to effect this escape.
How can the government be responsible for that, though?
Well, that's why we need answers from the Ministry of Justice on things like the court delays. What have they been doing to tackle court delays? So Labour has set out plans, for example, for more prosecutors, also to speed up detective recruitment so that we can speed up some of those investigations, speed up the prosecutions, actually tackle those court delays. We also need to know what did the Ministry of Justice do in response to some of the concerns, the independent reports about conditions at Wandsworth, both in terms of staffing and also in terms of some of the security upgrades that we see these reports about them having been delayed. The government has to show it takes national security seriously and it has to show that it takes prison security immensely seriously and that we don't just have this sort of crumbling public services around us because action isn't taken when warnings are put forward.
So you would make the monies available, whatever is necessary, Labour, if you won the next election, in order to sort this problem out?
Well, we've already said how you could address the additional prosecutors and the faster recruitment around detectives. Well, that's what we don't know, is what has happened about that security upgrade, why that has been delayed, because we understand.
But you would make the money
reports.
available to do
well,
that.
What we need to do is to tackle the mismanagement. We, we've been very clear.
More money, you would do that.
We've been very clear. We will set out how we fund everything that we will do. We will make sure that there are resources in place for every commitment we make. So we are being very responsible about that, and you'll be aware of that from a whole series of different areas. But I think some of this is also actually about delays and mismanagement, not sorting out the court delays, not making sure that issues around staff absences and sicknesses are dealt with.
The barristers were on strike. So, I mean, there were two things that the government couldn't do anything about.
Well, actually, the government could get a grip, and as you'll know, that there was a whole total standoff with no discussions between the government ministers and barristers. That did eventually get sorted out, should have been sorted out long before. When you've got issues, where the government's not responding to warnings, for example, about staff sickness, when you've got problems where they've not taken the suggestions that we've put forward about getting more prosecutors in place, there are always multiple multiple factors. The question is, do we have a government that gets a grip? And actually the evidence is they're not getting a grip on anything right now. We need responsible measures in place.
Let's drill down on what happened at Wandsworth. As you said, there are lots of questions that need to be answered. What sort of inquiry would Labour call for this morning?
Well, I think it's simply being an internal prison service inquiry is not sufficient. We need something
so an independent inquiry?
There has to be some independent element to this, and that's something that Shabana Mahmood, our Shadow Justice Secretary, is looking at the moment, because we need to make sure that we have some independent answers, not just internal explanations. There's got to be some proper accountability for what's gone wrong.
What do you want that to look like?
Well, that's what Shabana Mahmood is looking at the moment as to how that should take place, and that's the questions that we will be putting to the Justice Secretary. But I hope he will announce some kind of independent investigation, some full investigation when he comes. I assume will come to Parliament this morning in order to answer on this. But he's also got to give some answers himself straight away about issues around staffing, about the arrangements for the national security prisoners and where that they are being held. We particularly need to know why this individual was moved from Belmarsh, the higher security prison, to Wandsworth, which is a lower security prison, as well as why the proper security checks weren't in place on a van leaving the prison, why that wasn't happening.
Yeah, just before I let you go, talk to me about the latest investigation that R. Jason Farrell has discovered. A child strip searched by Greater Manchester Police without any adult present for a vape.
So this is really serious. We have said for some time there need to be proper new rules around strip searching, around the situation, particularly for children. And we had obviously the awful case of Child Q, where the Metropolitan Police recognised that they had got things completely wrong in that case. There have to be proper safeguards in place for children, including having appropriate adults in place. Some of this is about making sure that rules are enforced, and some of it is making sure that actually we think there need to be new rules in place to address this. The police do immensely important work every day, but everyone also needs to be able to have confidence in them and make sure that they are making the right judgments, particularly when children are involved.
And thoughts about those officers that did that?
I haven't seen the details of the report yet, but I think, look, clearly there are serious concerns that Greater Manchester Police will need to address.
OK.